Well, hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to this program today. We're so glad that you're taking the time to join us. My name is Jay Lyman. I am a librarian and a program manager at the Seattle Public Library. Um, and I'm the entrepreneur and nonprofit program manager is my title these days, which means that I need to spell the word entrepreneur more than once a day. And I can never remember where the E and the U go. I think it should be opposite of where it is. But anyway, welcome. We're glad you're here. I'm going to kick things off, and then I'm going to turn things over to Jeff, who's our amazing presenter and such an expert on this topic. That's going to be wonderful. Um, so let's start. I wanted to share at each of these three sessions that Jeff and I have done. We have started off with me sharing about a different database. And the database that I selected today is called ABI Inform. I'm going to open up my screen and show you how to get into this tool and show you how it works as well. But what you get out of this database is you can find these amazing reports called First Research Reports, and they are industry information. So if you're trying to understand what's going on in the broader industry for the restaurant industry or for the automotive industry or whatever it might be, we've got reports in there that can be helpful for you. Sound good? All right, here we go. So I'm starting off at the library's webpage, spl.org. And like Jeff said, like if you're not in Seattle, your local library just might have this same database. If you're in a nearby county to Seattle, like King County, Seattle is in King County, but Snohomish County, Kitsap County, Pierce County, you can also get a Seattle Public Library card and use our subscription if you like. But I think most of those also they get the same tool too. So I'm going to start with spl.org, which is the library's webpage. And then I go to Programs and Services, and then Business and Nonprofit. Then on this page, I'm going to scroll down to the Business Research Tools. And the one that I'm going to show you is this one called ABI Inform, Trade and Industry. So right there, if I hadn't have been logged in an hour ago, it would have it would have just now prompted me for my library card and my PIN number to get in there. But I was in there doing some searching already, and so it remembered me. It'll remember me for a couple hours. And then Trade and ABI Inform has lots and lots of information on different things. If you go to the publications list, you can see there's 4,400 publication, like those are the types of publications that are in here. And so you could browse those if you liked. But I'm going to show you, I'm going to go back to my search page and let's say we were looking for the restaurants. So I typed in restaurant, and I did this on purpose just to show you that when I typed in restaurant, it came up with 1.2 million results. Way too many. And many of them are things that are not super relevant, right off the bat here. So I'm going to show you a trick on how to get to these first research reports, so you can ignore the 4,400 whatever other reports and just get to the first research reports. So what I do is go to advanced search. I'm going to put restaurant up at the top. And then in this second box, it says and. I'm going to change that from anywhere to publication title. So now we got this one anywhere and then and first research. That's the name of the report. And so then now I've got my search set up like that. Now check out what happens. Now I get 12,000 reports, which is still too many, but the top reports are all showing up with more relevant things. And see how they all say first research industry profiles here? So I've just limited it to just these industry profiles. Top one is on grocery, so it's talking about restaurants somewhere in the report, aquaculture, florists, lodging, mobile services, bowling centers. So a lot of them are talking about restaurants, so they're coming up in my search here. And okay, so here we go. Casual restaurants, done in February, and then, but let's look at that one. That's a good example, I think. Casual restaurants. So here's our February 2026 casual restaurant profile. You can see it's loaded in a little in the browser here. And if you look over here on the side, you can see under the suggested things, more casual restaurant ones. There's actually one that's more, well, this one's a little older. These are all older. But then here's the fast food ones. And if I clicked view all, I could probably get the full service restaurants. So you can see lots of different restaurant reports. They're all the same type of report though. Just to make this bigger, I'm going to click on this download PDF. And then when I double click on it, it opens up in my browser and I can make it bigger so we can all see it. So it tells me that the industry has about 250,000 establishments. They have a revenue of $300 billion. You can see how they're competitive, like how industries, how they compete in this industry. You can see competitive advantages, which is cool. Some companies, key companies to watch. Here's um uh here's revenue by service, so alcoholic beverages versus other services at casual restaurants. Some of my favorite stuff. So they got a sales and marketing section, but my favorite stuff is right in the middle. Here's the forecast. So over 5 years, they're expecting this to it's pretty flat, like over the next 5 years. It's still growing, but growing at uh, 4.5 to 5% over year. So not too bad. And then they tell us why they think that. So here's issues, commodity costs, food safety, challenges, consumer spending, in wage increases, uh, trends, opportunities, marketing through social media, menu choices. And then
And
down, there's like, so each of these reports is like 16 pages. And you keep scrolling down. And then here's some of my next favorite stuff are these company benchmark trends. So this is where you can compare your business to the industry. So of those 1,200 or 122,000 businesses they analyzed, they said that they spent about 2.4% of their income on advertising. So there's a number you can use to understand how is my plan to advertise, like in line with those in others in my industry. And lots more ratios and things, ways to compare your finances to those of your industry. And then at the very bottom, if I want to learn more, here's a list of six different either trade publications or trade associations where I can learn a lot more about this industry. Some of them want you to become a member. Some of them are just have stuff available for free. They're all different, but it's a great place to of like here's some new next places to look. What do you think?
Jay, in your experience, have there been any industries that these reports don't cover?
Yeah, so where we sometimes come short are sometimes like for this one we got to casual dining even from restaurant. But sometimes we'll see something that's like we won't find the specific report. So like maybe somebody is doing um, a something like acupuncture or something. So that might be we might have to back up to a certain kind of medicine or something. So sometimes you have to back up to the larger industry. So that's where I think I find them kind of coming short sometimes. It's a great question. And when it does, I go back to to my page where I started with ABI Inform, and I try the next one on my list, which is this Business Insights Global, because it sometimes it has that niche market that ABI Inform didn't have.
I think over the 15 or 20 years I've known you, Jay, and I've sent people to you for this kind of research, I don't think you've ever turned anybody away for lack of information, lack of being
Thanks.
able to access information. So,
Yeah,
um,
we try not to leave folks hanging. And and another thing that we do sometimes too, like if we just like it just doesn't get to the thing we're looking for, then I start to look for other places, so Business Insights Global, or sometimes there is a report that's owned by or is subscribed to by like UW Foster Business School of Law. They and so they get it. So that's sometimes another path that we can take for some reports. Not all reports can be done that way, but I'm thinking of one called IBIS World that they have, we don't have. Yeah. What questions can I answer? Okay. Well, I think I'll turn things over to you, Jeff. If there's no more
thank you.
questions, I'm going to be here for the next 15 minutes. I'll be present, but not accounted for. But no, I'll be around, but I'll be less present in about 15 minutes.
And you'll stop your screen share so that I can throw mine on.
Yep.
Okay, everybody just be patient a second so I can do my screen share. Okay, share and screen share and share. Okay. So everybody should be seeing a slide that says why franchising, what you need to know. Okay, great. That's a
We
good
see it.
start. And Jay, thank you for that great information. And again, please use your library. The resources are amazing. And they're things that you cannot find on Google searches or AI searches because of the way they do their business. So let me first share just I've been in franchising as a franchisee myself now for 25 years. And I was thought before this talk today, I might just share why I decided to look into this. And I think, James, from the comment you made, this may relate to you a little bit too. So part of why I got out of the sort of the more corporate world is that, franchising allowed me to own my own business, but without partners. And it also provided a world where I didn't see any age discrimination. I didn't see any politics. I didn't see any forced retirement. And I saw predictability. And those were things that when I was in my 50s started to be important to me. Franchising also changed my view of my relationship to work. And I'll get into this a little bit more deeply. But when I started looking at as the business more as something that would not only generate income and maybe a diversity of income, but would also generate time. To me, it was important that as I got older, I was able to carve out quality time for health, for family, for travel, and et cetera. So the business was more predictable. And I will tell you that sometimes income may be less in a franchise business than if you took a job as a programmer, for example, at Microsoft. However, you can be in the business much longer. So money and time have a related function. And the other thing, what I realized in a franchising is you do create value. So value means at some point you can have the business work for you more if you hire people and implement well, or you can sell the business and then create value that way. So that was my initial motivation. So you guys can see my contact information here. I, oh, I'm going to try to throw a lot of good information at you, but if there's something I missed, I know, say, Alex, in your case, you're thinking of maybe becoming a franchise. I'm happy to talk, maybe, just happy to talk with you
Truthfully, I
separately.
have two business degrees. I'm just like I'm learning and listening and like thinking about, excuse me, future with crochet. And so I'm just like
Sure.
thinking about a lot of different aspects of business. And so I'm
Gotcha.
here, I'm listening. Yeah, thank you.
Gotcha. Love your background, by the way. It's,
Thank you.
that's something
Very
you
proud
did.
of this piece. Yeah.
So anyway, you guys, you have my information on it. And certainly I'd encourage you to link in. I do not follow up with anybody unless they're interested in talking with me after this talk. So the agenda for today is, why evaluate franchises? First of all, I think it is an off-ramp from a corporate job or working for the man, as somebody said before. I also think that when you're in the job market today, it is a sort of frustrating environment because there's so many changes going on. There's so many things at the national political level that are just making it harder, and artificial intelligence making it harder for companies to make decisions. And I think looking and evaluating different options is in some way self-empowering. You're putting yourself in a position where you have the chances of making decisions as to what's right for you rather than waiting for someone else. We'll talk about franchising as a pure business model and maybe how that might differ from other types of business models. We'll talk about categories of franchises. People, oftentimes we think about franchises as the McDonald's of the world and the 7-Elevens. I've helped almost 400 people start franchises, and maybe three have been in the food business. So it's not as dominant as you think it is, but because we tend to see it in strip malls, we tend to think that that's all franchising is. I'll talk to you about the typical profile education of a franchise candidate. That's been a moving target and a changing target in the more than 2 decades I've been doing this. We'll talk about the franchise investment because obviously that's a very important thing. How are you evaluating the franchise from a financial point of view? I'll cover different kinds of franchises and in general what their investment levels might be, what makes up the investment, and we'll go into the franchise disclosure agreement and then what your next steps might be. And then I also added some supplemental material that I'm not going to really go over it today, but just some other reading material that may be helpful to you. So is that agenda acceptable to this group? Good. Okay. And we are a sort of small group today. I don't know where everybody is. I guess the sun came out and they said sun, golfing, and they decided to not go to franchising today. I won't bore you with my background, but you can certainly look at it at LinkedIn. I've been very lucky in that I recognized early in my career that I really didn't want to work for other people. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So in my early 30s, I moved to Seattle, helped start a business. Um, and that business lasted. The business is still going today. It's still quite successful. But when I was 53, I decided to part ways with the business for a number of reasons and decided to look at franchising. But in the years, I've had, fortunately, a lot of experience in pure entrepreneurship, starting businesses, raising money, and in the last 24 years, very much focused on helping people evaluate franchises. So that's my background. And I think when somebody comes and talks to you as a speaker to a group, they have to have some credibility. And so that's my shot at providing some credibility for what I'm going to say today. So, if you don't, part of what I want to hopefully do today is motivate you a little bit to maybe move a little bit further down the road than where you were when you came today. So if you don't commit to building your own dream, I guarantee you someone will hire you to build theirs. And when you build their dream, they really control your time and they pay you for it, but it's really not maybe encompassing all the things that are important. Franchising continues to be a very, very stable, predictable, kind of business. And this data that I'm putting up on the screen now is really brand new. It's 2026 data that says that in this year, it's predicted that almost a little over 12,000 new franchises will start. They will add 150,000 new jobs to an already stable work force and 14.1 billion in additional economic output. So sometimes people think about franchising as something that's very small, very niche. It actually is a major driver in our economy. And by the way, again, because we have a small group, I could yak and take up every bit of air in the room. If there's something that's important to you, please let me know. You can either put it in the chat, which I'll try to monitor, or we're a small enough group to please just raise your hand or just speak up because I really want to make this time worthwhile for you guys. Okay. So the word franchise, if you look at its derivative, it's actually a French word and it means to free oneself from servitude. And sometimes when we think of working for someone else, we really, again, are serving their desires, their whims, and their goals. So when we think about what a franchise is, I think it's important to understand fundamentally what role franchise plays in different types of businesses. So first of all, it's a distribution method. And so every franchise starts out as an independent company. And in their case, they have proven that they could make money with their methods, with their approaches. They could duplicate the results. And then they could take those results and put them in a manual, just to make it simple, and train other people to follow those systems and have similar reproducible results. And a lot of times companies want to grow, but when you are an independent company, being able to grow nationally and internationally without the franchise model, it's very difficult because you have to build infrastructure to support your company, to support the staff, to support the management of employees, et cetera, to raise funds. So the franchise model gets people who have an idea to say, we can now take this and build a franchise around it and have relationships with entrepreneurs who will the funds to start the business in their location. So they're very systematic. You might find this, some people find it restrictive. I actually found it refreshing when there's a cookbook, basically, that you're following to make sure that you're getting similar results to what the franchise model is supposed to do. If you look at the success rate of franchises versus true startup businesses, they're much higher. And again, the reason they're higher, I think if we sort of peel the onion back, the person that's running the business doesn't have to create everything from scratch. They don't have to come up with the web page. They don't have to analyze the customers in terms of when they buy, how they buy. They don't have to figure out pricing models. They don't have to figure out the advertising that's effective for that kind of a business. So franchises do have a high success rate. Barriers for you to get into a franchise are lower than if you're trying to start an independent business. And a lot of times that revolves around financing and funding of a business. All banks today, significant banks, actually have preferred lending lists of franchises. They're very familiar with them. They're comfortable with them. So the barrier to entry tends to be lower. And the other thing is that franchises today, and this might sound counterintuitive, they're not looking for people that were in the same business that they're in. They don't want old habits. I'm not going to say bad, but they're not going to say old habits to be brought into their system. They look for people that are motivated, that are clear on the vision and the goals they're trying to achieve. They look for people that understand their transferable skills that are coachable. And so that's where sort of the corpus of franchisees come from. And lastly, and this is really important to understand, if you invested in a franchise, you still are working for yourself, but you're not by yourself. And what I mean by that, every franchisee has their own corporate entity. So I'm JL Consulting Services, Inc., with a DBA, doing business as my franchise. So if you started up a dry cleaning franchise, you'd be maybe John Smith Inc., DBA, whatever the franchise is. And the reason that's important is we go into business today because we're trying to develop equity, we're trying to develop income, and we really don't want anybody to tell us how much income we can take out of the business. We don't want anybody to tell us whether we can set up a 401k or those kind of things. So you truly have the benefits of being in your own business, but you're part of a system where you've got a lot of support going on. I'm going to take a quick drink. Anybody have any questions or thoughts? So I'll make it a really quick drink. Okay. So let's just sort of talk about the cohort that you guys might be in, from an age point of view, education. So almost 50% of people that go into franchises have bachelor's degrees. Another 25% have master's degrees. So it's, and I want to tell you the other side of this too. If you don't have a college degree, you will be just as much welcomed into a franchise if you have the other qualities that they're looking for. Okay. The other thing that's changed in the years that I've been doing this, when I started in 2002, the typical client was a white male, 55 to 65, who's lost their job, and the family wasn't used to the concept of entrepreneurship. And today, the clients have become younger. I think the average age today is about is 39 to 54 years old for people that go into franchising. We're seeing a lot more couples today going into franchising together. And the reason for that, in my view, in my opinion, is that the vision of working for a company until you're 65 and retiring and being financially set, that's sort of gone away. A couple of reasons. One, very few people work for one company until they're 65. But two, I'm 77 and really healthy and don't see any reason not to continue to work. And so the franchising creates a home, a place where you can own your own business and work as long as you want. Or I should say, as long as you're coherent. And so far, nobody's given me any negative feedback in that area. So what are the top franchising categories? And again, you don't want to be looking for the shiny object. You don't want to be looking for the fad. But there are some trends, and just to be aware of them. So health, beauty, and the fitness category has always been a solid part of franchising. You go to any corner, any strip mall, and you have hair salons, great clips, sport clips, fantastic Sams, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you look at the health area of franchising, you've got the Orange Theory, and you've got Stretch Labs, and you've got 24-hour fitness, and I can go on and on and on. So it's a category that's always strong, and then there's some boutique things in the fitness area as well today. Hydration and vitamin therapy, et cetera. Foods and restaurants, again, that's never going to go away as a big category. And it's a sort of a dominant category, but I mentioned before that, I've helped nearly 400 people and maybe 4 in the food business. Very few of my clients want to be in the food business. Very popular are business services. And, companies today, when they downsize, when they lay off groups, they still need the commercial cleaning, they need the accounting, they need the IT services. Most of you might know that over 98% of businesses in America today are small businesses. And so if they can figure out ways of getting work done for just what they pay for it and reduce overhead, it's attractive. So franchising does a lot of work in business services. Not surprising, general retail, the 7-Elevens of the world are still a big category. And one category that I do a lot of work in, so I'm surprised it's number 5, but 5 still means it's really busy, is things that relate to the home services, like two-income earners, where people don't have time to maybe have their carpets cleaned. They want to do a refresh in their kitchen. They have a plumbing problem. These are franchise businesses. And on a personal note, I've got 2 sons. The oldest one is a very highly qualified mechanic, works for a fire department. The younger guy was a typical technology worker, and when he got into his mid-40s, decided that there's really no long-term future. And so he worked with his dad, and ended up in a home services franchise. So that's a very strong category that has multiple opportunities. If we take another look at this area, where have been some of the trends and growth areas? One that I probably need to add on to this list is pet services. For some reason, people spend money on their kids and their pets. It has nothing to do with what's going on in the economy, particularly pets, but products and services for seniors. And there's a lot going on in that category as well. There's in-home non-medical care, in-home medical care. There's placement services to help people move into senior living facilities as needed. There are estate dissolution franchises that help you sell your house and get rid of your stuff. So that's a big category. 12,000 people a day turn 65. Tutoring, education is always going to be very, very strong in terms of franchise models. Franchises that bring in some element of things that are good for the ecology are also strong and growing. Any home service that makes it easier for a two-income family to get things done, that's a big growth area. And I mentioned business services before, and then health and beauty. So these are some of the trends that continue to be strong in the franchising world. So when I put this seminar together, and I've been doing it, of course, updating it regularly, but I thought it was valuable to give you a perspective from the franchisor's side of things. Because again, if you enter into a franchise agreement, you will be and partnership is not the right word, but you will be contractually obligated mutually to some franchise company. And the left side of the screen is the positives from their perspective, and the right side of the screen is what keeps them up at night, what their issues are. So franchisors like the model of bringing their business to market as a franchise because they can grow much faster than if they tried to do it themselves. They're giving up a lot of control, but they can grow much faster. I remember the story of Menchie's yogurt, and some of you might be familiar with that brand. They came up with the idea of moving the machines from behind the counter to in front of the counter. And within 2 years, they had hundreds of locations. Franchisors like the fact that when you've made a decision, you're investing your own capital, you're making a commitment in time, so you're likely a motivated person. And so they don't have to worry about the pom-poms and motivational speeches. They know that you've made a commitment. Franchisors like the fact that because you're implementing a business model, they can focus on the future. And again, when you choose a franchise, you want to make sure that there is a future, that the people that are running it have a vision for what's going to come next. Franchisors also like the fact that there are costs to running any business. And if they can reduce the costs by spreading them across the system, that's a positive. I'll give you a sort of editorial comment. Some people look at franchise costs and say, oh, they're nickel and diming me to death. I look at it totally differently. If there are things that a franchise brings to you that the costs are lower because it's spread out across the system, that's a significant benefit. And I'll give you an example. In my franchise, they charge me $150 a month for a technology support fee. And if you've ever hired an IT person, you know that that doesn't get you very much. But because there's 200 of us, it supports a full-time IT person. And last week, I had a major email issue and really appreciated the fact that I was able to get that support. Lastly, franchisors like the fact that you're really sharing risks together. Today with Angie's Lists, with everything that's on the internet, nobody hides. Nobody hides. So you have to really share risks and support each other. What they don't like, franchises don't, they don't have, you have a contractual agreement, that's the limit of their control. Their growth is based totally on how well you do, not just selling. I can talk about this more than I'm going to today, but franchises don't make money on selling franchises. Simply stated, they have to pay commissions for people that are involved in the sales process, and they have to support you for the number of months that it takes for you to start making money. So they really, their growth is based on royalties and how well you do. If they have a poor performer in their system, they probably got to put an inordinate amount of time into trying to get that fixed. Big problem for franchises today is finding quality candidates. Many people are on the internet today looking for franchising. And unfortunately, it creates there's about 4,000 franchises in this country, and literally 150 to 180 million people looking at, what's online with franchising. And so they have to deal with that, and it's a problem. And then lastly, and you guys may not totally appreciate this, but franchising is a regulated industry where they are required to meet certain benchmarks by the federal government and certain state governments in terms of disclosures. And lastly, if there is any litigation or arbitration that is existing, franchisors can't hide that. They have to disclose it in their franchise disclosure document. So that's the franchisor's point. For most of you on this call who might consider being a franchise, look, what did I do? I went backwards, sorry. The left side again is the positives. The right side are things you want to really consider before you sign a franchise agreement. Is you can, if you know how to evaluate a franchise and you're not being sold, you're being either coached or educated, you can get a lot of information, and you should plan on taking adequate time to digest all of it. If the brand has a name, if they have good social media presence, you get the benefit of that goodwill. You get the benefit of something that is proven where you're implementing as opposed to creating. The other thing I like about the franchise on the positive side is that once you've made a decision, you're set up on a schedule to get opened as quickly as possible, or as quickly as you want to be opened. So the turnkey concept of getting all your licensing in place, getting your training set, looking for location if that's necessary, all that is done in coordination with the franchisor. Other positive is training and support. One of the benefits I've enjoyed in my franchise is that it's a very open culture, and I can get their formalized training, but I can call anybody in the system for help if I need it. At this stage, more people call me than I call them, but it's a tremendous benefit, and that's inherent in the sort of network of owners, because we don't compete with each other when we're owners of the same franchise. But here's some of the negatives that you want to make sure fit into your personality and your lifestyle. It's not a true partnership. You don't have a seat at the board. You want to, I'll talk a little bit in a few minutes as to what makes a strong franchisor, um, a good culture. But oftentimes decisions are made not for your specific benefit, but for the benefit of the system that you're in. Royalties are based on revenue, not profits. So if you're not paying attention to the business, if you're not managing your costs, you could be selling, maybe not collecting, but you're still responsible for royalties. Um, Making sure that the franchise management system is in tune with trends so that they're always working on what's next. That's one of the things I've really appreciated about my franchise. They've been visionary in terms of being a little bit ahead of the curve of what's been happening in the market. Realize that in some cases, and this is probably more specific to the food business and maybe a little bit into the massage therapy business, uh, a bad reputation in one location could affect the whole system. And every time there's a coli in a taco time up in New England, it becomes national news. So that's one of the potential negatives. And then lastly, control and independence. I found that personally, as I got older, control wasn't as important as predictability and the business creating the lifestyle that I wanted. So if you have to control everything, franchising may not be the best thing for you. Okay. So what do you look for in a franchise? And again, part of why I share these things is that oftentimes people skim the surface. They think there's a good market for something, and they don't think about these other elements that I think are very important. Do you participate in decision making in some fashion? Are there active committees? Uh, can you call the CEO and talk to them about things that are going on, get their input, provide feedback? Do they encourage communication throughout the system? Is training something you go through for 2 weeks and you never hear from them again? Or is it ongoing? Is it regular? Is it open to your employees? Do they help you understand key performance indicators? And I'll use the word benchmarking. So if you do right things happen, but you have to understand the numbers in the business. And does the franchise provide that kind of support? Do they give you a knowledgeable coach to work with you, particularly in the beginning? Do they have regular scheduled meetings where everybody gets together? Most franchises have a marketing and advertising budget, but are you just sort of paying it into the sky and you never see the benefit of it? So you really want to understand, how does that work? Um, do they help control the supply chain so that you're buying the products you need at the best cost available? And if there are some important big decisions like real estate, some franchises have physical locations. Do they provide the experience, the assistance to make sure that you're not getting into trouble with it? Okay. It's a good segue for another drink of my water. Any questions, guys? Ladies, gentlemen?
Jeff, one of the things that I've seen as I've looked at more of the, FDDs and
Yep.
one of the agreements, it's like most legal agreements I've seen on the other party's paper, it's very specific about what I'm supposed to do. It's very specific about, what growth targets you're supposed to hit. It's very specific about what you are going to pay them and what the percentage of royalties are and what the minimum royalties are and all of that. But then when I start looking at accountability on the other side, okay, I'm getting training. Well, what kind of training is this? How do I know if it's working? How do I know if it's good? Marketing was another one. you pay them $15,000 a year for marketing. Okay, that's great. What are you doing with it? How do I know that that $15,000 is helping me grow my business? It's it's something that I've sensed, but is that like part of the um, franchising environment, or is that more, okay, you've got a sample size of two or three and you're just not finding the right ones yet?
I think your sense is probably a good sense. Remember that these documents, first of all, they're not marketing documents. They're not designed to tell you all the good, wonderful things about the business, assuming they exist. They're written by the attorneys of the franchisors to limit their risk. So, so I think the first of all, one, you should be reading it like you're doing. You should be determining maybe things that you maybe don't understand because they are legalese sometimes, things that you may think are not fair, things that you might want clarity on. And then you have those discussions with the franchisor. But most importantly, then, is if we're talking to a system that has 150 franchisees, talk to the franchisees about, what is it real, what is the support you're getting? You know, are you seeing a return on your investment in advertising and et cetera? So I think to get comfortable, those documents are designed to scare you. They really are, where you want to understand it, but in a practical sense, it's talking to the franchisee, talking to the franchisor about what's actually happening and what's happening through the other franchisees. I have signed 3 franchise agreements. The first one, it was like gulp, it had minimums in it and all that kind of stuff. The second one was a little more reasonable, and the third one was even more reasonable because they sort of wanted to have the old man around. So I think typically, and I know we're going to spend some more time talking together. We can talk about how do we address any chances. They're typically not negotiated, but sometimes they can be clarified. So it's a great topic, and hopefully my comments might help you. I have never had an FDD be the reason someone doesn't sign a franchise agreement if everything else falls into place, meaning that it's a good business, the business creates profits, and the franchisees are happy. But thank you. Good question. Anybody else comments? Okay. Okay. So I will tell you that there's some clutter. And when I say clutter, when you go online to look at franchising, if you get to the franchisor, you're sort of fortunate. Sometimes you'll get into these systems that are designed to capture your email and sell it to brokers around the country. And there may be some good ones. There may be some that really are not so good. And when you go through the internet, oftentimes the franchisors are trying to qualify you more quickly. So if you are going to do something like this on your own, you have to understand what your rights are, and you have to be willing to stand up for what's important for you, and don't let anybody push you faster than you're willing to go yourself. Okay. And so a lot of clutter, over 4,000 franchises, 80 different industries. And when I try to help people, the foundation is really what are you trying to accomplish? What is the income you're trying to achieve? What's the relationship to work? What are the industries that are important to you? And then start focusing in on what the nature of the business is. Otherwise, it can become a little overwhelming. So let's talk about investment in a franchise. And it doesn't matter what the franchise is, they all have this concept of a total investment. And that number is composed of 3 items. So the first item is the franchise fee. And I've never seen a franchise fee negotiable. So just put that aside for a moment. Franchise fees can be territory based. There could be discounts for military veterans. There could be some internal financing of them, but the basic franchise fee typically doesn't change. So that's the first component. The second component is what are the physical assets you need to run that particular business? So if, for example, it's a lawn care business, you need a truck, you need a trailer, you need a lawnmower, etc. That's your property, plant, and equipment. And then once you've paid your franchise fee, once you've bought the equipment, what does it cost you every month to keep the doors open? And so when you have these, you have the basis of doing a financial projection as in what sales number do you start making money in the business? And again, keeping in mind certain of these things like the franchise fee, the property, plant, and equipment are sort of amortized, meaning that the costs are spread out over typically the life of the agreement. So we typically make money in a franchise or any business when your sales and gross margin exceed what your monthly operating costs are. So you're really looking at what point can I get to cash flow break even every month? And so when a franchise gives you an operating capital number, they usually, excuse me, they usually give it in terms of a dollar amount times a number of months. And that's their estimate of how long they expect you to be putting money into the business before it becomes break even, and then you can start taking money out of it. Does those concepts make sense? Okay. Okay. So with that, let me talk to you about my view of different kinds of businesses and the general investment levels of each of them. And when I say general investment level, I'm talking about franchise fee, property, plant, and equipment, operating costs. So there are franchises that are in this sort of sole contributor model. And again, I like to think of myself an example of someone who really thought out the kind of lifestyle I wanted before I looked at a franchise choice. So I used to manage like 300 people and travel 6 days a week. I wanted simple work on my own, work from home. I love Zoom. So I looked at franchises that were consulting, coaching, recruiting, things that you could do on your own without building an organization. And so franchise fees in those kind of businesses tend to be a little higher. The franchises value their intellectual property, so they probably tend to be like $60,000 to $80,000, but that's a one-time fee, not an annual fee. The property, plant, and equipment is typically, a computer and a cell phone. And your operating capital might be paying for certain insurances or going to some training, et cetera, maybe some local marketing. So that category is probably $125,000 total investment. Okay. But your time to break even tends to be shorter because you don't have a lot of operating costs. The next category, and this is probably one of the bigger categories, are service businesses. That's when you're growing an organization. I think those kind of businesses create more value. So it's like my business probably doesn't have much value if I try to sell it. Where if I built up a Molly Maids or a Mr. Electric or something like that, the business has more market value at a time when I might want to retire. But service businesses, you're hiring people, putting them in a car, putting them in a truck, sending them out to provide a labor service. Some of the more popular ones today would be, the whole medical home care is a service business. Again, doing carpet cleaning is a service business. It's a very, 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 very big category, garage door repair, and I can go on and on. Investments there typically are in the 150 to 250,000 range. The next category, this sort of small box, that's when we start thinking about businesses that need a physical location. So if you're going to do an automotive repair shop, if you're going to do a gym, if you can do a therapeutic massage, do an ice cream shop, small box. and they tend to be 150 to 350,000. Now, there are franchises that are much more than that, but in terms of my general experience, that's about the area that people invest for franchises that require a physical location. Okay. When we get to this bottom category, particularly the one on the bottom left, I ask clients I think a fairly important question, and that is, at their stage of life, are they looking to replace income, or are they looking to diversify their investments and maybe not work in the business? And so the investor manager franchise is things like hair salons and gyms and therapeutic massage and there's a whole bunch of sort of niche businesses that fall into that. And as the owner, you're not going to be a receptionist. You're not going to cut hair. You're not going to be a gym coach. You may, but people typically in that category look at developing multiple locations over time, and they're not necessarily looking at immediately replacing income that if they owned a sign shop or a print shop, that might be their goal. Okay. Investments there are usually the franchisor wants you to commit to 3 territories and development over a couple of years. They typically are franchise fees in that category might be $120,000, $130,000. The cost per location is normally about 200, 225,000. So these are bigger investments, but the goal is to get these into cash flow producing businesses where you don't have to work in them at all. Okay. Last, or not last, but next to last is specialty. And that's just, sometimes I think about taking this list off, but sometimes people just want a hobby. And they want to take a trailer to a sporting event at their college football game and sell popcorn or coffee or something like that. Maybe they want to put a kiosk in a mall during November and December during the holiday season. So there are some niche franchises there, and they typically are under $100,000. Not necessarily full replacement income type businesses. And lastly, conversions are less of an issue today, but I often, when I'm working with somebody, we might look at the market they're in, and if there's an opportunity for a resale, an existing franchise, we'll take a look at that. And again, there's positives and negatives. When you buy a resale, you're paying for the earnings that business has created over the years, or typically a multiple of those earnings. So I know I'm throwing out, and I can't give you a price on resales today. They're all over the map. Could be from 100,000 to over $1 million. Okay. And just so everybody knows too, Jay will be sending you these slides in the recording. So if you missed something or try and take notes and you miss something, not to worry, you'll be getting them. Okay. So it's a natural thing after talking about investments to talk about how do you finance a franchise. And today, I think financing a franchise is certainly a lot easier than financing a independent business. For any number of reasons. One, franchises have more credibility with banks. So if you had this great new unique idea, you'd probably be trying to raise private money as opposed to going to a bank. So the considerations that you need to have are, one, do you have liquidity? And liquidity is something that is either cash or can be turned into cash quickly. So for example, if you already have a home equity line in place, I'd consider that part of your liquidity. So franchises want to make sure you've got that, because liquidity would pay for a down payment on a loan. It would pay for, your franchise fee, maybe some of your initial training. And it also is important that you can demonstrate that you can cover what it costs you to live. That's important, right? So having a good handle on those numbers is really important. And then next, having an understanding of what your borrowing capacity is. I've learned over the years that, whether you take money from a bank or from an uncle or from your retirement funds, whatever, it's all green, same money. How can you get it at the best cost possible in a way that enhances your business? So learning about that's important. Um, that's something I probably would be talking to offline with folks. It's a lot to learn, but it's part of your education. Make sure your credit score is good. It's got to be at least to get the best rates in a bank loan or have the best favorability. It's got to be at least 760 or higher. Okay. If it's under 700, you probably want to work on that a little bit before you might apply for a loan. And then last thing, the franchisors look for something called net worth. And net worth is all the assets that you own less all the things you owe. What is that theoretical number? If you sold everything you owned and you paid every debt you had, what would that number be? Franchisers want to know that number, not because they're looking for you to make the biggest investment possible. They want to know the number so that if you invest in their business, they know that you've got the resources if things might take a little longer than they may have predicted for whatever the reasons are. And lastly, I include this link for any of you that want to do sort of like a pre-qualification. This is one of the companies that I have dealt with for over 2 decades. And they do a pre-qualification and tell you what they don't do any credit checks or anything like that. They don't ask for a lot of detailed information, but they'll say if what you're providing is true, you can borrow this much against this, you can borrow this much against that, and they'll give you some basic education about options. Okay, before I get into the legal side, which is always fun, anybody have any questions? Nope, just us, just a small group here. So I don't know where everybody else is today. So, Chad, you were kind enough to bring up this issue of the franchise disclosure document. It is really important, and there's two elements to it. You have the franchise disclosure document, and then you have the franchise agreement. The franchise agreement is the contract you sign. However, when you sign that contract, it's saying that you read, understand, and accept the terms of the franchise disclosure agreement. So you have to review and read that. Oftentimes, people will have an attorney do a review. So there's things that they can help you clarify as well. They can help you if there is any potential for negotiation. They can help you with that. But it's important that you read it and understand it. Sometimes you would also need some legal help for these other areas. I would strongly suggest that you don't incorporate right away, because once you incorporate, you have city, state, federal reporting obligations. And until you know what the business is, it's just more of a headache than anything else. If you are going to have a partner agreement with another, not within a family, but with an outside investor, you want to have that done by an attorney. And if you're looking at a resale, you absolutely need counsel to protect your interests if you're looking at buying a resale franchise. So let's dissect a little bit the things that are in this agreement so that you have the best chance of understanding it. So every franchise, it doesn't make a difference what business they're in. They could be in yogurt, they could be in senior care. The chapter heads of these 23 chapters are exactly the same. But of course, the material that's in it can vary. But they do tell you who owns the franchise, any affiliated companies. They tell you the business experience of the people that are running it. And to me, that's really, really important. If it's a relatively new franchise, do the people that own it have experience in similar systems in the past? If there is any litigation, if there have been any bankruptcies, you're disclosed. And these documents are very serious. franchises get in a lot of trouble if they're puffing information that is not based in fact. Um, they tell you what their franchise fees are, if there's any other fees that you're obligated to pay, and then the initial investment. And that's a very important section because that breaks out in detail that property, plant, and equipment. So when you start to put together your own vision of what you think you can do in the business, that's a real good resource. And again, you want to validate some of the information because depending on the market you live in, you might fall in the low, medium, or high end of those costs. If they want you to be limited to only the products they sell and service, that's clarified. Uh, these franchisees' obligations typically are the payment side of things. When royalties are due, and do you have to go to a convention, etc. If they provide any financing, it's listed in there. And I think, Jed, this was the basis of your question. What are they committing to you? And so look at that section, and we need to take a look at that carefully. Territory is really important. One of the reasons why I love doing this with the library is the franchisors have great resources to provide you information about why they think a territory is viable. But we want to trust, but we also want to verify. And so the library is a great place to do that. Trademarks are listed, patents are listed. Item 15 is one item you want to take seriously, and that is this a part-time gig or a full-time gig? Do they expect that over time you could become semi-absentee owner? What's the vision? Really important. You don't go into a franchise when they expect it to be full-time and only do it part-time. You'll be in trouble pretty quickly. Another important one is this concept of when do you renew, what happens if you leave, what happens if you sell it, and how are disputes settled. Public figures, it's interesting. I would have thought many years ago that that's not important, but sometimes you find that in the franchise, there's somebody who you may not like. You may think that they're not the best person in the world. And if they're an investor in the franchise or a public figure, you want to know that. Item 19, one of the most important sections, that's where the franchise gives you a view of earnings at the franchisee level. Item 20 is the complete list of every individual that is a current franchise owner and any that have left in the last year. Again, I would not necessarily run out and start calling those people until you've educated yourself enough on what are the questions to ask. Item 21, very important, is the franchise itself financially healthy? And those are typically audited financial statements of the franchisor. If you have to sign any third-party contracts, and just an example, let's say you can own a McDonald's and they want you to use McDonald's labeled plates. You likely have to enter an agreement with the company that supplies them. So those are included. And lastly, every FDD has a receipt. And the receipt is something that you really want to sign when you get the FDD. It doesn't obligate you to anything, but it does, after 14 days, allow you to sign a franchise agreement when you want to. Prior to those 14 days, if they don't have the receipt, the clock only starts when they get the receipt. Okay. So what is in this franchise agreement? This is the page that you would actually sign. And they've sort of pulled out what they feel are the most important things. So the use of trademarks, important. You're obviously investing in the use of a brand, and so there's obligations around it. The territory, really important. That's brought into the franchise agreement. Fees and other payments. Again, that has to be pretty clear to everybody. And then, Chad, to your question again, in the franchise agreement are obligations and duties of the franchisor. And I would hope that at least ones you've been talking to or ones we might talk about in the future, it becomes fairly clear what they're doing, what they are offering for this ongoing relationship. They also list restrictions on goods and services. And the reason they do that is, let's say you have an automotive repair shop, they don't want you to bring grandma's pretzels and put it in the store. It just affects the brand. So they're clear on that. And then lastly, what happens when you renew? And typically they'll have things like saying if you renew in 10 years, you pay a percentage of the then franchise fee. So there'll be something like that. If you decide to leave, what are your obligations if you terminate the agreement? And if you decide to sell it, what fees, if any, would they be entitled to? What's their role, etc. So a couple of thoughts, and this is more just a philosophy. I encourage people to open up their mind and consider. Oh, I see a chat coming in. That's exciting. Let's see. Okay, James said he had to drop. We expected James to drop. So, James, thank you for being with us while you were here, and feel free to reach out to me separately. I'm glad to chat with you. So, I think when we learn something new, it's uncomfortable. And so I'm just going to suggest that if you only limit yourself to what's comfortable, you're going to deny what's possible. And I think owning your own business is something that people oftentimes dream about. So what do you do next after this call today? And then I'll give you some local and national resources to go to. So always start off with your own dream of what is the income that you're trying to achieve? Because again, this is a business. This isn't a hobby. Think about the lifestyle. And again, as the older we get, I think our relationship to work, our work-life balance becomes extremely important. Think about, can the business help you create wealth? Meaning, what is the actual cash flow that can come out of it? How does that relate to what your needs are? And do you have an exit strategy in the business? And if you have an exit strategy, is your vision supported by the franchisor? Some franchises say, hey, if you want to sell, you're on your own. Some have very in-depth, mature resale departments that help you sell. Make sure that the franchise is registered in the state where you plan to do business. And I say that if your state is not a registration state, then it's not an issue. If they are a registration state, then the franchise has to be listed with your state. Always expect and request a complete understanding of the business model. If you feel you're being sold, if you're being pushed, if you feel you're not getting complete answers, your antenna should go up, because that's not the relationship you want to get into. Read the FDD. I wouldn't spend money on an attorney review unless you are pretty confident that it's the business you want to be in. Attorney reviews on these kind of documents are about $1,500, and you don't want to do multiple ones of them while you're evaluating franchises. Consider and this is the kind of work that I do, although this is not a sales pitch for myself, but there are people that are considered franchise coaches or franchise brokers. Their role is to help you get in the ballpark of the kind of businesses you should be evaluating. And the industry works like the real estate industry. You get paid by the franchisor, not by the person like yourselves. Realize that education creates options, not commitments. So don't be afraid to roll up your sleeves. Don't feel you're letting anybody down if you truly evaluate something and it's not right for you. And start nurturing a mindset of an owner, because most of the people I talk with have great skills, great talents, great career. They have assets that they want to employ, and you've got to be thinking about an owner mindset in terms of how you might employ those assets. And thank you guys for hanging in there with me. I know it's a small group, and Really appreciate it. So where can you get help? So certainly there's a trade association called the the International Franchise Association is franchise.org. Again, be careful about going there oh, I see somebody just came in. Interesting. Oh my goodness. Well, David, if you just entered, you're entering at near the end. Are you still on daylight savings time?
Are you asking me,
Yeah.
David, who just joined? No, I just unfortunately had a work conflict, and I was unable to get free until now. I only have a few minutes, and what I anticipated, I
Yeah.
think, is that this is being recorded. I'm really just hoping to ensure that I receive the recording after the fact.
Yes, sir. You will not only see the recording, but you will receive the slides, and I'll make sure our host knows about that. And again, you'll see my contact information. I'm happy to chat with you and maybe answer some questions and try to keep you out of a little bit of trouble if I can. Okay.
Great, great.
So I'm glad. Thank you for joining us. So franchise.org, just be careful. It's there to promote franchises, capture your name, but it just gives you another sense. If you're a veteran, the U.S. government has some great veterans programs. VetFran is where you can see them. SCORE is an area that isn't necessarily going to help you with franchises, but if you want to become more informed on business planning, on buying insurance, social media marketing, great resource. And they're national. They're part of this Small Business Administration. Most major cities have a women's business center, or also called a business impact center. Usually it's under the Women's Business Center that provides local counseling. If you really want to see what else is out there in terms of franchising, I suggest people go to entrepreneur.com. But again, and one of the warnings, David, I gave everybody, just be careful about giving your name out. There are people that, like for myself, we get paid by the franchisors, so there's no cost to you. But once you get your name out there, it will be sold to brokers around the country. You got to be a little careful about it. Even if you're on LinkedIn and write, I'm available for work, you'll be the recipient of a lot of calls. There's just some other things, other resources that the SBA provides. There's a 2023 small business trends that probably a little out of date these days. But also, you've got my email. And again, I welcome any calls. And just as a recap, this is my information. The next part of this, I'm not going to go into it in depth, but I want to just show you some of the information that you will also get as sort of just addendum material that I think might be helpful. But let me take a breath and see, David, what caused you to even jump on this call?
Yeah.
What is your interest in franchising?
Well, just getting to know a bit more. It's somewhat coincidental timing. So my career has actually been in nonprofits my entire career. I'm currently the interim executive director of a small organization here in Seattle. Um, Keyword interim. So I left my sort of steady job
Sure.
because a small organization where I volunteer and I'm on the board was in crisis. So I'm just here temporarily. I don't exactly know what's next. And someone on LinkedIn must have found me. I don't have the open to work circle, but someone reached out and said, I want to talk to you about an opportunity. You look like a good fit. Well, it turns out it was a franchise broker kind of a thing. Not that I'm opposed or upset by that. And then like that weekend, I was in the Ballard Library or maybe I got an email. I don't know what it was, but somehow saw a flyer somewhere about this. And I thought, well, I should at least learn more before I'm talking to someone
Sure.
who's trying to sell me on this.
Yeah.
But by coincidence, I am actually looking to figure out whatever is next, employment wise. And I do have one kind of fundamental question,
Yeah.
which you may have covered already, but I just don't have a sense like if being a franchise owner is like a good, viable business opportunity, because I have this gut instinct, this suspicion,
Yeah.
skepticism that it's like the macro mothership corporation, they're the ones making the money, and they somehow have convinced people to like buy into their model for
Sure.
a little while. And that's not based on any facts.
Yeah,
I'm just
yeah,
like,
yeah.
that's the fundamental question I have about being a franchise owner.
Well, I'm hoping maybe before you meet with whoever found you on LinkedIn, spend an hour with me. Again, there's no charge, no
Yeah.
obligation on them,
Okay.
but I'd like to delve into that. I did explain a little earlier in this talk today that I don't think personally franchises make money by selling franchises.
Okay.
Okay, they basically have to pay, broker commissions and their internal sales commissions, and they have to support you for the amount of time it takes till you are actually making money, and then you are paying royalties to them, and that's where they make their money. So
Okay.
there's an encouragement for you to build a bigger business because there's bigger royalties, but it's still you're. I mentioned earlier too, in a franchise, you tend to have your own corporation and you tend to get the benefits of your own corporation. And when you do your forecasting and you build your business model, royalties are a cost of doing business.
Sure.
But you
Right.
still should be able to envision what your earnings might be. So great questions. I'm sure it's in no matter how many times I cover the subject, you have to sort of go through the process of evaluating for yourself. And yeah, it's so interesting. And you guys might remember when some lady spilled some tea that she
Yeah.
had got from McDonald's and got burned.
Yeah.
Okay. The reason I'm mentioning this story is that the law very carefully determined that these were two separate entities, that McDonald's corporate and the local location were independent companies only combined by their franchise agreement. So there's a lot of litigation around it, but there really is a clear separation. And if you evaluate it correctly, you understand where those lines are and whether it's good for you or not. And I tell people, plan on taking, a couple of months to not only resolve if something is an opportunity for you, but is it going to address and meet things that are important to you in your life? Which is a good segue into some of these things in the next section. Again, I'm not going to go into these in depth because it's another, but I think about work-life balance when you think about a franchise. Think about things that are important to you that you want to make sure you can build into your day, build in the next 10 years. Um, think about the fact that today, unfortunately, if you're in the job market, 50% of everybody 50 years or older will lose their job, no fault of their own. This slide is something that's just to remind people, I'm not going to go into the details, but just remind everybody that don't try to time a market. Don't try to time a market. And our beautiful country has rebounded from all sorts of challenges. There's just some other things that are just sort of just food for thought when you think about them. And if we ever do talk again, we'll sort of talk about it. A little bit of humor there, a couple of books. Of course, I always use an opportunity to let people know that I co-authored a book that when it originally came out was rated one of the top six business books, and it is available from the library. So I'm not here to sell books. You can get it from Jay at the library. And now that I've spent about an hour and 10 minutes of your valued time, I'm happy to just stay on the line with you guys and maybe talk about anything that's important to you.
Jeffrey, I'm going to head out, but I want to say thank you so much for your time and for the information that you shared and showing also some of the resources that are available online at the library. So thank you so
Yeah,
much.
yeah. Thank you so much for joining. Again, I know what it takes to sit down and do embroidery and knitting. And have you ever heard of the Knitted Knockers Association?
No, and I don't knit. I only crochet.
Really crochet. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the things my wife does is makes artificial prosthetics for women that had mastectomies, and it's a huge national thing and
Okay.
requires some special material and stuff. So
Oh, that's too bad. I wonder if they have a crochet version of it.
they might. If you email me, I will be happy to ask Andrea and get you a response. But they also make hats for cancer patients to keep their heads warm. So I'm sort of on her recruiting team.
I love it. I
All
appreciate that so
volunteer,
much.
all volunteer stuff. So thank you for joining today.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.
Yeah, you take good care.
Okay. So it's David, Chad, Cindy, it's just us and our host from the library. Anything else
Yep.
on you guys' mind?
I think we've kind of gone back and forth. You've given us a lot of stuff to think about. It's definitely one of those. The more I dig into it, the more I learn, the more questions I have.
Good.
It's just. But I think to your point, it is a risk mitigation measure for going into business for yourself. But the more I dig into it, it's like, okay, the risks are still there. It just looks like they're different risks.
Well,
And
you're right to think about that because there's a balance in risk and reward. And so if you're looking for certain rewards that are maybe beyond that, just working for someone, there's always going to be some risk associated with it. And the question is, I have found for myself that I didn't get into a franchise until I was in my mid 50s. When I was younger, I had a different appetite for risk. As I got older, I had a lower appetite as well as my wife and my family did. So I think franchising might end up having more on the positive side in terms of mitigating risk, but that's something you'll have to discover with time and patience. Yeah,
yeah,
good.
absolutely.
And David, what's the name of your nonprofit, if you don't mind
Yeah,
sharing?
we're called the Safe Crossings Foundation. So I spent a decade at the Gates Foundation, then I worked at another organization, but I've been on this board and I'm now the interim executive director. Safe Crossings Foundation, we support kids who are grieving. So kids who are a sibling or a parent has died while they're young.
Mm,
And it's all free programming, whether it's a grief camp, whether it's a counseling or a school um, group. Um, but my time is winding down there. I was not intending to be the permanent executive director. I just stepped in
mm,
and I've been running the organization with the board, of course. And we are very close to extending an offer to a finalist. And I was just going to say, I will absolutely take you up
yeah, please
on
do.
finding an hour. I already just sent you a LinkedIn thing. I found
Great.
unscripted on YouTube just based off of the slide here. But I may be, finished with this role
Yeah.
about a month from now. And so it may be like in May that I, I have time.
That'd be great. What you're referring to, the unscripted arena. Well, I've been a mentor at Seattle University's Business School for 25 years.
Mhm.
And 25 years ago, one of my mentee students ended up becoming a financial planner. And for reasons that are not overly important, I needed a financial planner to manage a particular investment. And his name was brought up to me. Long story short, besides being a wonderful young guy who owns his own financial planning business, he trains mixed martial arts,
Mm.
world-class fighters. I'm not talking about clubs, I'm talking about international world champions. And that's his hobby. And so he asked to interview me, and he does this thing called the unscripted arena, and that's what that is.
I
But
see.
but
Okay.
but you did find my pure LinkedIn, which is actually
Yes. So you'll see an invitation from me and we'll be able to follow up
great. Great.
and connect that way.
Okay. Well, you guys have been very generous with your time. I appreciate it. Uh, it's unusual that Jay's leaving for Europe, I think tomorrow with his family and just had some things that had to get done today. So I think he's taken his phone with him to make sure that he's there to support us. But I'm sure he's getting everything done. So if there's no other questions, I know Chad and Cindy, we've got some time scheduled later in the week. Looking forward to it. And David, I'm looking forward to spending a little time with you.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Okay, everybody.
Thanks, Jeff. Talk to you
Thank you.
soon.
Okay, stay well. Bye-bye. Jay, bye-bye. If you're still there. Okay. Let's see. Stop share. Jay, are you there? You probably can't talk. I'll catch up with you later.